We are joined today by Representative Izzy Smith-Waddell. You've proposed a bill to create an Office of New Pennsylvanians. What would that office do?
Yeah, the Office of New Pennsylvanians. Let me back up a step. First, thank you for having me on today. It's a real pleasure to be here. The Office of New Pennsylvanians, HB 1113 in this session, would create an office within the Department of Community and Economic Development that would streamline and organize all of the services that are accessed by our newest neighbors, immigrants and refugees who are coming to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What we're talking about is good government here. We're talking about efficiency. Instead of seeing these things spread across multiple departments, we want to give folks who have needs, folks who are contributing to our economy and to our culture, a single point of entry and coordination, make things a little easier for them to be productive, participating residents of the Commonwealth.
What inspired you to propose this bill?
The legislation is something that we see in a number of other states, but really clearly here in Pennsylvania, me and my colleagues, Representative Joe Hohenstein, as well as former state rep, now Allegheny County Executive Sarah Innamorato, we're just looking at the environment in the Commonwealth and coming from three different places across Pennsylvania, seeing the sort of dropped balls and missed opportunities for our immigrant and refugee neighbors, and not even just in talking about accessing services, but also in licensure, making sure that we're acknowledging their credentials from their home country, making sure they can participate in our economy, helping to make sure that they can find places to live, and if they want to, and frankly, as many do right here in Lancaster, access whatever support they need to start businesses and help provide supports to the rest of our communities.
You are a member of Pennsylvania's General Assembly's Welcoming Caucus. Can you talk a little bit about the work of the caucus?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, pardon me. When William Penn came here, he came to the shores of what is now this country, carrying a document, the charter, the document that would later transform into the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And he came here on a ship called the Welcome. This is the most fundamental Pennsylvanian tradition, is to say that where people want to make our home their home as well, we ought to be welcoming of that. We ought to be supportive because we know two things. One, this great Commonwealth is founded by people who in a variety of ways were coming across oceans, coming in from storms, and built it into the beautiful thing that it is today. And the other is we know that our Commonwealth goes further when we are providing that welcome. And so the Welcoming Caucus is organizing around legislation to advance those interests and those core Pennsylvania values in our General Assembly.
About how many immigrants come to Pennsylvania every year?
You know, that is a great question. What I don't have that number off the top of my head. What I do know is that between the two censuses, so when we look at the 2010 and 2020 census, the only group to increase in terms of demographic population are our Latino neighbors. And so much of that population is driven by immigration. And so that's not only contributing to our economy, whether it's agricultural, business sector, what have you, it's also making sure that we maintain the sort of political power and relevance that we have in terms of the number of congressional seats that we get at the census. So when we bring in these new neighbors, we are ensuring Pennsylvania's stature in the whole country.
Can you walk us through some of the services that immigrants would need when they first come to the United States?
Absolutely. So often when new immigrants come to the United States, if they are refugees, right, like they're connected with a refugee resettlement agency, though of course that's under threat. If they're coming in via other mechanisms, whether they're coming in under a visa or coming in under asylum, sometimes they come to our office to determine what social services that they are eligible to receive, and frankly, which ones that they aren't. We also see a lot of folks immediately coming in. We have new Pennsylvanians coming to our office, folks who have arrived in Pennsylvania just weeks ago, asking about what steps they need to take to start a business in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, try to get an education in the Commonwealth. So those are some of the services that the Office of New Pennsylvanians would seek to streamline. And then, I am a member of the General Assembly. When we provide constituent services, many of those come from the various departments in the Commonwealth. And so another thing that the Office of New Pennsylvanians would be tasked to do is to help our district offices be those access points, making sure that folks can be as participatory, as productive, as engaged as residents of the Commonwealth as possible.
What other legislation was proposed by members of the Welcoming Caucus?
So the things that I would most direct people to, first and foremost, you're going to want to look at Representative Johanny Cepeda-Freites' bill. Johanny is a colleague. She came in my caucus in 2022. And, she has legislation that would do two separate things. One, we want folks who have come here under DACA, our dreamers as they were, we want them to be able to teach in our schools. So making sure that they are able to get credentialed to teach. That's thing one. And that's important in part because we're looking at this massive teacher shortage across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that we need to tackle from all sides. She has another piece of legislation, the driving equality bill. That's going to make sure that our neighbors, sort of regardless of status, are able to get driver's licenses. You might ask the question, why should folks in that situation be able to get a driver's license? And the answer is, really frankly, is that it keeps them and all of us safer. We want anybody who might drive on Pennsylvania roads to be educated on what the rules and requirements are and to feel safe in the process of driving. And we know when people feel safer, regardless of status, they're more likely to engage with their community. They're more likely to engage with law enforcement in an unsafe situation, and more likely, for example, to seek medical care or education when they need it.
You spoke at a news conference about the economic impact of having immigrants in our state. Can you give us some examples of that impact?
Absolutely. So I live on South Shippen Street in Lancaster City. Right around the corner from me, there is some of the best food in Lancaster City from businesses run by immigrants. If you go to the northern tier of the Commonwealth, much of our timber products industry, which supports really the entire northern half of the state, right here in Lancaster County, I believe it supports about 5,000 jobs. Many of the people who work in the timber products industry come to this country as immigrants. If you look just as nearby as, say, Chester County or right here in Lancaster County, you know that our agricultural product industries, those are largely staffed and serviced by immigrants. But here's the one that's the most important to me. We, during the budget hearings a couple of months ago, if you look at the Senate Health Committee hearings, you'll see that a senator asked, we've talked a lot about Black maternal health. That's an important issue. Are we talking about rural maternal health? And I think that's a great question. Are women in rural areas getting access to the birthing care that they need? Many of the people that staff our rural hospitals, making sure that Pennsylvanians can get the birthing and all kinds of other care that they need wherever they are in the Commonwealth, are immigrants. So you were talking about agriculture, we're talking about timber, we're talking about service sector, new entrepreneurship, and healthcare. Immigrants are having a direct economic impact in every one of those sectors.
What inspired you to get involved with immigrants coming into Pennsylvania?
I'm from Lancaster. I represent a district that is about 40% Latino. We have the distinction of welcoming more refugees per capita than any other place in the United States of America. I see myself as carrying on a tradition of my place. This is home, and that's what we do in Lancaster.
On day one of his second term, President Donald Trump signed an executive order allowing immigration and customs enforcement officers to conduct raids across the country. How common have these raids become in Pennsylvania?
That's a great question. We don't really know, in part because the way in which immigration enforcement has been transformed under this administration is frankly reckless and unaccountable. There's not reliable communication with other local authorities or communities about how these raids are being conducted. And as we know, we are seeing legal residents and citizens, frankly, held in detention and being transported across national lines. But it is exactly that lack of certainty that frankly creates fear in a lot of communities and for folks, regardless of their status, whether they're citizens, whether they're legal residents or otherwise, they've created a culture where people feel unsafe, and that is only a drag on Pennsylvania's economy. It's not helping out anyone here in Lancaster County.
What legal protections do immigrants have in Pennsylvania?
That is so it depends on of course what their status is. The protection that we are all entitled to is due process under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Folks have a right to legal representation if they are detained or if they are accused of crime or if they are threatened with deportation. And I think folks need to know that. The other thing is that the Fourth Amendment still applies. And so, we often tell folks that if someone comes claiming that they have a right to search your home or to detain a certain person, to ask for a warrant. And I think, frankly, that's something that every Pennsylvanian, every American should do. They have the right to make sure the proper judicial and legal procedures are being followed and not an administrative detainer, a warrant signed by a judge.
Immigration organizations such as Highest PA have lost federal funding. How will these organizations being underfunded impact Pennsylvania's immigrant communities?
In pretty much every way that you could imagine. I think folks see these agencies mostly as just managing the process of people coming in to our communities, but it also organizations like Highest, organizations like CASA, like Church World Service in Lancaster. These organizations advocate for folks as they are living here, provide connections to the community, help secure housing and employment, making sure that our neighbors are actually engaged in our community in a way that builds our economy and builds our population. Taking that away does not take away the presence of our neighbors. Setting aside whether it's the moral thing to do, it really just makes life harder for all members of our community, whether they are native born or they came here recently. And in the particular example of Church World Service, many folks are unaware, refugee resettlement organizations work on reimbursements. And so what happened here in Lancaster County is that services were provided in December and January for which the federal government promised reimbursement. And then the new administration said, we don't care about promises made. We don't care about commitments or traditions. We're going to pull the rug out from under. And what I want to frame here is that didn't just damage the new refugees and asylees, the folks who had already been here. It cost about $70 decent paying jobs for Lancastrians, some native born and some immigrants. These are damages to our economy.
According to Lancaster Online news source, the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office joined a program with ICE that will give local officers the ability to question people's immigration status. And you mentioned being from Lancaster and representing Lancaster. What does this mean for your constituents and your hometown?
I mean, honestly, one of the worries that comes most to the surface, if you look at other Lancaster online coverage, it seems that the sheriff's department is struggling with staffing issues, making sure that we can keep the courthouse safe, et cetera, et cetera. And so a question that comes to mind is, do our sheriff's deputies actually have time to be doing this additional job? Does the department have time to be taking this on for what seem like political reasons, or should they focus on hiring and retaining staff so that they can do the job that they already have?
How has the daily life changed for immigrants in this country since the new administration took over?
I would say really this is about a culture of fear and a sense of moral injury. Look, we have folks who are coming here, they have given up so much to come here to provide a better life for themselves, to provide a better life for their children. And in the meantime, while they are doing that, they are also making my community better. So they're doing all three of those things at the same time. And they've been told, like they were told under the Biden administration, the Obama administration, two Bush administrations, the Clinton administration, the Reagan administration, that if they followed certain rules, if they did certain things, if they worked hard and were members of their community, they'd be afforded certain protections. And there is a real attempt by the current administration to throw those protections that have been agreed on in a bipartisan fashion out the window to serve political goals that, frankly, I don't think will last. And so I think that change mostly constitutes a moral injury, and not just to immigrants and refugees, but to all of us as neighbors that's going to be hard to recover from.
While we're on this topic, as we make this recording, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments about birthright citizenship. Can you explain what that is and what will happen if it gets taken away like the president wants it to be?
Absolutely. Birthright citizenship, which is an old tradition here in the United States of America, is this notion. If you are born here on United States soil, you are one of us. You are legally, civilly one of us, and you are part of the community that makes up the United States of America, and entitled to all the rights and burdened with all the responsibilities of a United States citizen. It's one of the ways that we made a country of immigrants from Britain and the Philippines and Italy and France and Ireland and Africa into one union. And so what happens when that goes away? Frankly, I'm unclear. We have operated in a space of, there's a history of legal precedent around birthright citizenship. And it's not clear what it means for that to go away and what that means for, folks across multiple generations. It throws into the air some of the fundaments of what it means to be an American. And I personally think that that's very dangerous.
What are some other legislation involving immigration that you would like to see brought before the State General Assembly?
I think for me, my priorities mostly are about where the rubber meets the road. Not just what laws are we prepared to change, what are we prepared to fund? Where the federal government doesn't seem particularly interested in the civil rights of Pennsylvanians, and I mean all Pennsylvanians, making sure that legal defense, indigent defense for both immigrants and non-immigrants is funded in this year's budget in the Commonwealth is going to be crucial to defending our civil rights. So I'm looking at that, like the support that we provide for the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, but also some initiatives around making sure that immigrants and refugees, anybody who's threatened with detention and deportation, is able to access all the rights they're entitled to under the Constitution. And frankly, sometimes what that means is a good lawyer. So that's my priority, especially as we roll into budget season in just a couple of weeks.
Now, shifting topics slightly, you've also proposed legislation involving sealing eviction records. Can you explain what the bill would do and why you felt that it was important to propose?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's HB 1095. You'll hear it some places called the Ready to Rent Act. If you've never seen a background check that a landlord pulls on a tenant, you might not know there's a section that says landlord, tenant, it says eviction, it says court history, et cetera, et cetera. That will tell you the date and the type of the case, but it won't tell you if it was a non-payment eviction or not. It won't tell you if it was over $5,000 or $5,000. Pardon me. It won't tell you if there was domestic violence involved, if the case was withdrawn, or if the judge found in favor of the tenant. And what we know is that when landlords are looking at these applications, oftentimes they see just an eviction filing and they throw that application over their shoulder, which is to say, there are Pennsylvanians being denied housing over evictions that never even actually happened. 30,000 Pennsylvanians will be in and out of eviction court, landlord-tenant court this year. And what HB 1095 does really is make sure that we're not treating them as second-class citizens. Its most important provision is this. In line with the amount of time it takes a bankruptcy or a home foreclosure to fall off of your credit report, about 7 years, it would seal evictions 7 years old or older for any resident of the Commonwealth, making sure that these things don't haunt them, prevent them from accessing housing, for the rest of their lives.
Where is this bill in the legislative process currently?
We are very pleased to say that we got a strong bipartisan report out of the Housing and Community Development Committee. We only had 3 no votes, and so we had support from 14 Democrats and 9 Republicans as the bill moves to the House floor. And we're expecting to see it run soon. We have the support of groups as diverse as the Service Employees International Union, the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. So we're looking forward to moving this bill and then, taking the approach, I consider Chairman Jordan Harris one of my mentors, taking the approach that the Clean Slate bill took. We want to set a foundation, and then from that foundation in future legislation, we'll continue to advance the rights of anyone in Pennsylvania who wants to try to find a home.
Lastly, you mentioned that the budget deadline is coming up. What are some things that you hope are included in this year's state budget?
Okay, I've got a long list here, so we'll just pull that out. No, obviously our priorities are going to be making sure that we're keeping our promises and frankly our legal obligations under the fair funding lawsuit, alongside reform to how we fund cyber charters, which are pulling money from our school districts to spend them on things, like elaborate trips, club memberships, billboards, et cetera, et cetera. But other priorities for me include making sure that where the Commonwealth provides, support to our local child care agencies. Like, this is a key equality issue. It also unlocks the economic power of the women and parents in all of our districts. And then restoring funding for holistic repairs to people's homes, making sure that we're getting back to providing support for critical repairs. And the way that I always talk about this is like this. if you have a grandfather or grandmother in your district who lives on the corner, if their boiler goes, if their roof goes, and we're not providing support to help them stay in their home, you've not just lost a neighbor to probably a house flipper, you've lost someone who like sits out on their porch and keeps an eye on the kids, helps keep the neighborhoods stable. And so when we invest in housing and housing stability for seniors, we're not just investing in the physical structure, we're investing in the social fabric of the Commonwealth. So those are going to be some of my biggest priorities, as they always have been, housing and education in this year's budget.
Representative Izzy Smith-Waddell, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.